Welcome back to Hoop City with Paul Sir here on your sports leader, Sports 1440. I am pleased to be joined by the longtime voice of the Minnesota Timberwolves, play-by-play, and that's Alan Horton. Alan, thanks so much for making time to speak with me today.
You bet, Paul. Good to catch up with you.
Well, likewise. And it's good to catch up with me from your vantage point, Alan, after a decisive Game 3 victory for the Timberwolves last night. The Target Center sounds like it was rocking and rolling, and why wouldn't it be? But we'll get into the drama surrounding the game because there's some, I would call it somewhat uncharacteristic trash talking that I think Coach Chris Finch said to Jaden McDaniels, well, now you've said it, now you got to walk the walk. Yeah. And he did that in spades last night. Talk about the game last night.
So I think you're right. The trash talking, I think it happens in every series, but I think Jaden McDaniels took it to a whole new level. I can't remember another time in any playoff series where, he said, we just want to attack their defense. They don't play defense well. And he named all the names. He went Jokic, he went Murray, he went Brown, he had Gordon. He went through their lineup and said they're not good defenders. And that was a little shocking because, like I said, you don't hear that very often. And I'm always a big believer, and I know Chris Finch is in the same mindset where you let sleeping dogs lie. Like, don't give them any extra motivation. Yes. Especially a team as good as Denver that won a title just a couple of years ago, and they've got the world's best player in Nikola Jokic. So maybe not try to anger him, but with the cat already out of the bag, what are you then going to do? Well, I think everybody kind of realized, well, we got to back up what Jaden said. Jaden certainly led the way in that category. His defense has been unbelievable in this series.
It really has.
In Game 3. And the whole team came out, and they did exactly what Jaden was talking about. They attacked the rim. The rim numbers are unbelievable in this series. The Wolves have no fear of attacking Jokic, Gordon, whoever's inside. Gordon was out last night. But, the Wolves are getting 48 rim points a game, not paint points. They're getting 58 of those. But at the rim, those are high percentage shots, and they're shooting 74% on those shots, and Jokic is just getting torched. He seems unwilling to try to go up and contest because that's generally how they play. When David Allen was asked about his defense heading into this series, the first words out of his mouth was that there's multiple ways to play defense. One of them is having a good offense, which I think speaks volume about the fact that you don't have a very good defense if the first thing out of your mouth is talking about the offense.
That's right.
And during the regular season, that can work. And that philosophy has worked for Denver in years past. They don't have to be great defensively because their offense is so efficient. But when that offense doesn't look so efficient anymore, now you really have a hard time stopping teams. And the Wolves just absolutely steamrolled them last night.
They really did. And the McDaniels chatter, like you said, very unusual. Something I've really never heard, too, where he went down a litany of names very specifically and said, basically, you're terrible defenders, so we're going to attack you. Right. And there was a moment in Game 2 in particular where it looked like a switch was flipped, where the Wolves seemed to be a bit on their heels early in the game. They were taking perimeter shots, but then they started attacking, started having success, and then, of course, there's the fabled 19-point comeback. Wolves come back, win Game 2, and then absolutely just roll over the Thunder in Game 3. I'm curious about your perspective on this. Like, one of the criticisms of Jokic was in Games 1 and 2, it was like he was feeling it almost. The appearance was, I can flip the switch when I want to score. Yeah. In the first half, he was very passive offensively, looking to set his teammates up. He's such a great passer, et cetera. But then I wrote a blog about Game 2, and my MVP in Game 2 was a guy who scored 2 points and had 7 rebounds, and that was Rudy Gobert. Because really, for one of the few times, Alan, Rudy Gobert in Game 2 certainly dominated Nikola Jokic, and in much of Game 4, if not dominated, he gave Nikola Jokic more trouble than I've really ever seen anybody give him in terms of altering his shot and making him uncomfortable. Yeah. Rudy's play has been outstanding against.
Yeah, there's no doubt about it. There's no doubt about it. It's a great lesson for all the kids out there too. Hey, you don't have to fill up the box score to have an impact in the game. The box score doesn't tell you everything. It tells you a lot of things, And you can tell a little bit by Rudy's impact with the plus minus, but his defense has been sensational. And so far, when he's been the primary defender, opponents are shooting 33% against Rudy Gobert. That is 20% lower than expected. I mean, that's out of this world. That would lead the league if it was during the regular season. It does lead all postseason players. So he's been fantastic on that end of the floor. I mean, Jokic shot 57% in the regular season. He's shooting 40% in the postseason, and he's settling for threes. He's just jacking them up early. That's another thing that stunned me about last night, was that I think Jokic got up at least 3 or 4 3-point attempts in the first 6 minutes of the game. That's not his game. It's a complementary piece to his game, but he doesn't start shooting threes, especially when the threes haven't been falling. It's almost as if, clearly he wasn't giving up, but when you're taking the least path of resistance, that's a good sign for the other team if he's just settling for those outside shots. But Rudy has been awesome, and I really think resting him the final 3 games of the regular season, nobody takes better care of their body, is more meticulous about the food that he puts in his body. And so I think after a long season, that really paid dividends. And there's not, for a guard maybe, or someone who's got a shooting touch from the outside, a delay like that, 3 games at the end of the season plus the week off before the first game, that can kind of throw players out of rhythm a little bit. But Rudy's game is more confined to the rim and the paint, so it didn't throw his game out of rhythm, and I think the Wolves have really benefited. He's been unbelievable. He and Jaden McDaniels have been 2 of the best defenders, not only on the Wolves, but on any team in this postseason so far.
When you use the term a suffocating defense, I've never seen anyone play a more suffocating style more successfully than McDaniels did last night on Jamal Murray.
Yeah.
I mean, Jamal had an all-star season, but especially in the third and fourth quarter, it was like up another level. And I think people forget how big and long Jaden McDaniels is, and so athletic and so gifted at guarding the perimeter. But he's all of 6'9", right?
Yeah, and that wingspan he's got a 7-foot wingspan, and when he picks you up 3-quarter court, you feel it. And there's a big reason why Jamal Murray has struggled, not only in the series, but specifically in fourth quarters. He's worn down. They have to rely on him for upwards of 40-plus minutes a night. And by the time you get to that fourth quarter, I don't care what kind of shape you are, a 40-minute game is 48 for a reason. It's a long haul. And if you're constantly getting pressure on you the first 3 quarters, it takes its toll. And you see that with both Jokic and Murray. Their numbers just fall off a cliff in the fourth quarters. It didn't matter so much last night because the margin was so large in the fourth quarter. I did think it was interesting that David Adelman really pulled the plug with four something left to go on the clock, and it was kind of a 17-point game. And remember, Christmas Day, these 2 matched up, and Denver rallied back from a 9-point deficit in overtime with just like 2.5 minutes to go. So if any team should have had a little confidence that maybe we can get something going, as bad as that night was, I was really stunned that he just, you work so hard to try to give yourself every opportunity to win the game. I don't know why there wasn't just 2 more minutes or a minute and a half to see if that group could catch fire, because that's exactly what they did on Christmas Day against the Timberwolves.
Absolutely. And I'm talking to Alan Horton, the voice of the Minnesota Timberwolves, here on Hoop City with Paul Sir. Of course, so much attention is being paid, and I think the fact that Anthony Edwards hasn't been the dominant impact performer that we would expect him to be if he were 100% healthy. And I don't, Alan, want in any way to demean what, the fact that he's playing through an injury. But what is Ant's status with his runner's knee? And what was very, I thought, impressive for Anthony Edwards was he was so into the game, supporting his teammates, even though he couldn't be out there doing what he would like to do and what's expected from the fans, from his team, that he would be able to do.
Yeah, Ant has clearly not been himself in this series, and it's a result of that knee injury that caused him to missing 11 of the final 14 regular season games. So there's a part of it where he's still dealing with some knee discomfort. It's the same injury that Steph Curry went through and missed a ton of time. And the problem with that apparently is that there are ups and downs. You feel good one moment, you don't feel good the next moment. It's not sort of this linear path of just improvement. And so you can see him oftentimes rubbing that knee. He'll tweak it a little bit. He'll have some contact and he'll hold it. So I think he's dealing with a little bit of that. and a little bit of still getting his legs back underneath him. You notice his 3-point shot has been way off in this series. And, that's kind of the last piece when you come back from an injury of, getting your legs and your body into it. That's a long shot from 23 foot, 9 inches. And that 3 ball has not been there. But I will say that his leadership in game 2 was just unbelievable. It sounded like he was just into it on the bench. He was encouraging guys. He's talking to Rudy. He's doing all the little things. And once the Wolves fell behind by 19, I don't know if that was the trigger, but whatever it was, they started moving the basketball, which is always the key to their offense. You have to have that 0.5 mentality. Either drive it, pass it, or shoot it, but keep it moving. Don't end up in isolation like the Wolves did 29 times in game 1. Well, they cut that in half. In game 2, they only have 14 plays of isolation. So that's a huge improvement. And I would imagine the numbers from last night are also pretty good. Low numbers of isolation. That's a nice sort of side dish to have, but you don't want to make isolation your main course. And so even though the shots haven't been falling, Ant has been doing all the different things. A little loud here. Sorry about that.
It's okay.
Fortunately, they're not coming for me.
It's okay.
But Ant's been incredible with his leadership, and you see it in his rebounding numbers. I mean, he had 19 rebounds in those first 2 games. He's picked up the challenge defensively. The numbers when he's on the floor as a team have been really good, especially on the defensive end. So he's still making an impact, even though we're not seeing him put up 38, 42 points a game.
Back when the trade was made to bring Dosunmu in, I think I was one of the many voices, but I was a very loud voice about this is the trade. I thought that was the best trade in up to the deadline myself, because of what he brought in terms of just a game-changing speed, but also attitude and leadership. Not vocal, but just in terms of his energy and effort coming off the bench. The Wolves have had some good reserves. I mean, of course, like Nickeil Alexander-Walker was a great, but I think what Dosunmu brings is even more impactful from my vantage point, watching what he brings. Now, of course, he's just come off a phenomenal game, but even in games where he doesn't put up 25 like he did last night in such an efficient manner, the way he impacts the pace of the game, the pace of play, defensively, energizes the whole team. Talk about what Dosunmu means now to the Timberwolves.
Yeah, Jim Peterson and I were talking about this on the radio broadcast last night. He's almost like a mini Anthony Edwards. He's not going to get you upwards of 30 plus or anything like that, but he's got a similar body type. He does a lot of similar things that Anthony Edwards does. And when Ant goes out with the foul difficulty, you just go to Ayo, who's basically the Wolves, only had Naz Reid on their bench before the trade deadline, essentially. And they make this trade and pick up another 6th Man of the Year candidate. I mean, he finished in the top 7, I think, in 6th Man of the Year. So he and Naz, you just basically doubled your bench output. And while you did give up a couple of young pieces, those pieces weren't contributing this year. So it almost feels like you just got this extra player, a 6th Man of the Year candidate, out of the blue. And you just basically doubled your bench potential with Naz Reid and Ayo. And guess what? You got Bones Highland playing really well in the second half of the season. Then you throw in a little bit of Kyle Anderson and a little bit of Mike Conley, guys that aren't going to give you a ton of minutes, not a ton of production, but just winners who know how to play the game, know how to do things defensively. Both Kyle and Mike are 2 of the smartest players you'll ever put on the floor. So you don't lose when those guys go out there. And all of a sudden, you got yourself a pretty potent team when before you kind of looked at the Wolves bench and you said, it's pretty much Naz Reid and that's it.
Absolutely. I'll tell you, the play of Randall, I don't think I've ever seen him play better. And the same with DiVincenzo. The confidence that exudes from both of them right now and what they're trying to do. And what I love about what Randall is doing is sometimes I think he fades away from his strengths, settles for outside shots. He's going right to his strength. And DiVincenzo, the way he pulls the trigger so confidently, so quickly, and his impact on the defensive end and the hustle plays, the little things that don't show up on stat sheets. Like the Wolves are very, very potent right now. Denver is wounded. Now, they've got Jokic. I think he took a lot of criticism after game 2. He came out yesterday and tried to chuck and chase and was doing everything out of character for himself, like you said, taking early threes.
Yeah.
But now the Wolves are hitting on all cylinders. It's going to be really tough, I think, for Denver. They can do it, but it's going to be a lot tougher for them with the Wolves playing with the kind of energy and confidence that they're playing with right now.
And I agree. And I realized Denver won 54 games in the regular season. They earned the 3 seed, and their bench came up really big during the season because they missed a lot of time. Jokic missed time for, one of the few times in his career. Gordon missed a lot of time. Christian Brown missed time. Cam Johnson missed time. And they earned that 3 seed. But there was always something about Denver that I just felt wasn't quite as cohesive
I agree.
As it was a couple of years ago. And I don't know if it maybe been these 8 straight years in the postseason. Maybe that's taken a toll. I don't know. There's just something a little bit off about this team. So I thought they were vulnerable. Now, they didn't look vulnerable in game 1, but boy, the Wolves punched them in the mouth in game 2, stealing that game. And all of a sudden now they're on the ropes. And I've always thought the Timberwolves, I know for a fact that these guys feel like they are their own worst enemy. They feel like they can compete with anybody in the league. They picked up 2 wins against OKC this year. They've beaten San Antonio twice as well. When they're at their best, they feel like they can throw punches with the best teams in the league. They go into Boston and won this year for the first time in like 20 years. So it's they have the capabilities, and it's usually been just their inconsistency, which has more to do with them than their opponent. So when they're locked in, and this was the hope, was that you could flip this switch in the postseason and all of a sudden have everything matter. And okay, we're all dialed in. We're playing together for one another. We didn't know whether that was going to happen because when you finish 9-10 down the stretch in your final 19, that doesn't look particularly good. There wasn't a huge win streak during the season. It was the consistent part of the Wolves season was their inconsistency and some losses they shouldn't had. And, you end up as the 6 again. You're hoping for a top 4 seed. Didn't happen. But they've been able to come together. And right now they look like a juggernaut. And they've got game 4 coming up tomorrow night.
Exciting times. And, of course, with that, the long-suffering Timberwolves fans continue to have their wounds heal from all those decades of difficulty that the franchise went through. And to see this year-on-year competitiveness in the playoffs. Talk about the impact of the Wolves just in the basketball world, in the Twin Cities in general, and the shift in optimism that for so long there was such a sense of pessimism in the Twin Cities about the franchise, but it seems very different now.
Yeah, it's something we've tried to stress on the TV and radio broadcast this year is just to, we're so trained as a society now just to be, in the moment, react to a win or a loss, but sometimes you do have to step back and realize that it's 5 straight years in the playoffs. It's a winning culture. And Tim Connolly, the GM, and Chris Finch have been at the forefront of turning this whole program around. And it's gotten on the tracks, and it has not stopped. At times it doesn't look great. Like I said, it was an up and down regular season, and expectations are tough to deal with when you consistently win. But to be able to erase or just overcome those years of futility is something that I think fans I hope really realize and don't take for granted, because it's hard to sustain winning in this league. Look at all the teams that had these small windows. Remember Memphis with Ja Morant a couple of years in a row. They were the number 2 seed. They won 1 playoff series in those 2 years, and they haven't been heard from since. Sacramento had that year where they had the best offense in the NBA history, and Mike Brown had them as the number 3 seed. They never won a playoff series. They were gone in 2 years later. Phoenix had that run to the finals with Chris Paul and with DeAndre Ayton. It looked like they were the juggernaut. They ran into Giannis, lost in the finals, and then they had to rebuild. Now, they rebuild pretty quickly, but still, windows in the NBA are really short. To be able to do it over the long term is pretty special. To make 2 straight Western Conference Finals says something. It's tough to win in the playoffs, and Chris Finch now has a winning record in the postseason. They've got a 500 record on the road in the postseason. That's tough to do. That's really tough to do. So it's been remarkable to see the last 5 years how this thing has been built. And Paul, the other thing too is, like, I was telling somebody this the other day, like the first 2 years the Wolves made the playoffs, they had to come through the play-in. And at the time you're like, okay, play-in, not ideal, but we'll deal with it. We're okay. Let's get through it. Okay, now we take on the 8th seeded Nuggets, or one year was the 7th seeded Grizzlies. And you realize that's no way to go into a postseason. That's no way to get deep into the postseason. You're just so far behind the 8 ball. If you're not a top 6 seed, just forget about it. I mean, the Miami Heat made one run as a play into the NBA Finals, but that's also coming out of the East, and Miami is Miami. But then they realize, you got to get the top 6 seed. Okay, and then we want to get a top 4 seed. Now, I think they're learning too, and I hope this is kind of the mindset heading into game 4 and then 5, is that to go deep in the playoffs, you also don't want to have these 6 or 7 game series if you don't need them. What really hurt the Wolves last time they played Denver in that 7 game series, which was epic, but it completely left them spent against the Dallas Mavericks, and there was a gentleman's sweep. It was a quick turnaround. You don't get the prep time. Good teams take care of their opponents, finish them off, and you take advantage of the extra days you get while your opponent's probably still playing.
Absolutely. And by the way, I always appreciated, as I watched your social media posts throughout the season, your messaging is very much along the lines of what you just described. And it came through to me loud and clear, Alan, about take a step back and understand where we're at. And the statistics that you referred to, pointing out of, yes, we're not playing great right now. We've dropped a couple we shouldn't, but these are the positives these are also the positives that you have to look at with this team.
Yeah, coach does a really good job of, fans after a bad loss, everybody, social media is just the angriest place in the world. Everybody wants Finch fired and everything. Those are tough to take, and obviously coaches want to win more than anybody. So trust me, those guys aren't in the business to throw away games. It's not like they do things on purpose. But guess what? There's an opponent out there, and sometimes that opponent, even a bad team, can get really hot at times. But there's always this long-term view. There's always bigger picture. And one of the things they always preach, and I know it's a cliche, is never get too high or never get too low. And you have to follow that. You absolutely have to follow that mantra, even though it is a cliche, because you'll run yourself ragged. You won't have anything left physically or mentally if you don't take that approach. And so that's the way the Wolves kind of handled things in game 1. They still felt confident after game 1, even though they lose that game. It's going to be a long stretch. You got to keep an eye on the future, because that is the biggest picture there, like the 5-year run, all the success. And I think Chris Finch has done an awesome job of keeping that in perspective. Tim Conley too.
Absolutely. You've been very generous with your time. I have one final question. Give me one key for the Nuggets and one key for the Wolves for game 4.
Well, it's interesting. I felt like we talked about this in the broadcast last night, that I felt like when the Wolves offense goes sideways, they don't share the ball. It's a lot of ISO. It's Ant trying to make things happen. It's Julius Randle trying to make things happen. I feel like that's the same thing's happening for Denver right now. They've just relied on Jokic and Murray. I'm not seeing the cutting that we're used to seeing. I'm not at times you'll see it kind of click in, but it hasn't been consistent by any stretch. Not the way we're used to seeing the number one offense in the NBA click. And so I think the key for Denver is that they got to score. They clearly can't defend, so they have to score. And they've got to get back to playing the way they do, move the basketball, cutting off the ball, getting that 0.5 mentality going. Right now they're relying way too much on Jokic and Murray, and the Wolves are feasting on that because they know that's coming. And in this postseason, Jokic is shooting 40% and Jamal Murray is shooting 36%. Those numbers aren't going to get it done. Those numbers are so far down from their regular season, about 17 or 18 points percentage-wise. That's a huge drop-off for both those guys. So I think that's the key to me, in my eyes, for Denver, is that they've got to get their offense on track. Wolves just have to keep having the same mindset that they've had these last 2 games. They've got to be pit bulls. They've got to, feast on the home crowd. You've got the home crowd for one more game before going back to Denver. They've got to come out strong and get that place riled up. It was interesting before the game. They always test one of the referees will come over and test the referee microphone. And so the referee came over, testing ref mic test 1, 2, 3, and the boos just rained down because everybody realized it was Scott Foster saying those words. And Wolves fans know all about Scott Foster from their game with Houston this year and their other game with Denver on Christmas Day. That was a Scott Foster special. Somehow we got through last night, Paul, and there was no – Scott Foster, I think there were a bunch of calls that went Denver's way, kind of evening things out, giving the lesser team the benefit of the doubt. But I thought the Wolves handled some of those well because I think a couple of calls were really, really questionable. But that's why you build a big lead, so those things don't matter as much. So for me, the key for the Wolves is same mentality. Just try to crush these guys. And I think they really like playing Denver. I think there's always been a confidence about playing Denver, whether it's here. I know they would love to pull it off in 5 games and win in Denver. That was game 7 was special a bunch of years ago, winning on their home floor and coming back from 20 down with 22 minutes to play. And there were thousands of Wolves fans in there too. Now they're dwarfed in the grand scheme of things, because that's a big arena. But towards the end of that thing, as most of the Nuggets fans had already left the building, Wolves fans were there and they were loud, and it was it's really become a great rivalry. And I think some of the comments by Jaden McDaniels, by David Adelman, by some of their guys, those guys were celebrating a little bit too early on in game 2. Aaron Gordon had a highlight dunk where he bounced it off the floor. He did it Jaden McDaniels. Jaden's done that a few times. You saw Christian Brown talking smack. You saw Tim Hardaway Jr. gyrating on the floor, like just getting his crap on. So there's been a lot of back and forth. And so it's been equal, even though I think Jaden's comments probably are at the top of the list.
Well, I think Jaden kind of broke new territory, which I think is fun, to be honest. I really, not that I like people calling each out, but that seemed to come from a very sincere place. Yeah. He comes across as a pretty quiet guy, but certainly the table is set for a fantastic Game 4. Alan Horton, play-by-play voice of the Minnesota Timberwolves. Thanks so much for joining me today. And fingers crossed that the Wolves, I talk about them a lot up here, and I'm a shameless Timberwolves fan. So I'm excited, and hopefully we'll be seeing them going into the second round after 5 games.
Yeah, sounds good, Paul. Anytime. Hope you stay warm up there.
Well, eventually we will. So
that's right.
Alan Horton, thanks so much for joining me today.
You got
here on Hoop City with Paul, sir. Take care.